I hope you will introduce yourself. I think it's always easiest if you say what you want to, what you stand for, and what your role at ILO is. I will skip my own introduction because I did that last time. So I think there is no need to repeat these things today. What I want to do, I want to draw the connection between the last meeting which we had, and to do that I will take up again two slides which I showed last time, and also showing the connection between data or input which Puru presented last time, only in one slide. But the main point which I want to make in my presentation before I hand over to Andres is that we're actually talking about two pieces of software today, or two tools. I'm curious to hear how if Andres will speak of software of a tool. So we're talking about openIMIS on the one hand, a tool to manage business process in health insurance. That's the one. And on the other hand, we're analysis, which is something different. And today we will sort of discuss and explore the relation of those two. So you always have to keep that in mind, that we're talking about two different things, two different pieces of software. So let me turn on the laser pointer. So this was one of the slides from the last presentation, and there, of course, openIMIS and the tool would fall under this lower part here, the software, the data collected in a health insurance, like Nepal we discussed last time, and then this data somehow, and that's what we will explore today. It was you can see here that we were very sort of general last time. Somehow this data is supposed to inform policy making. So somehow this data has to be transformed in a way that it actually answers the questions by policymakers to then inform political decision making. So, and the question for today is, well, how does this actually happen? Because this slide from last time doesn't really answer that question. It only says, well, something happens to make this data, and somehow there's actuarial analysis involved. But the purpose of today's webinar or today's Bhela meeting is to go into depth exactly, and well, how does this exactly happen? And that's where Andres will come in a minute. And again, this was a slide from last time. So we're talking, like, our perspective is here. We're starting from the perspective of openIMIS. So we're talking about health insurance operational data, insuree data, contribution data, claims data, provider data. So all of this is real world data, which is not collected for the primary purpose of doing actuarial analysis. It is processed for the purposes of the health insurance operations. That's where it comes from. So this is real world data. And this real world data now is supposed to be used for actuarial analysis, which is something quite different. And again, I think I'm sure, I know from our discussions that that Andres will go much more into deep detail in terms of how that is different. Now, what I highlighted last time was this connection that you may actually decide that when you do actuarial analysis based on this real world data, that for the future you want to change, you want to adjust your IT system, in our case openIMIS, to have data which is better used. In shared screen again.
It's okay.
Okay, so I was talking, and I hope that's where I left you off. I was talking about the bias in the data. Did you still get that, or should I start there again?
I think you need to start with that slide again.
Okay. Okay, good. So you have business process data in openIMIS, like the data mentioned here, insurer data, contributions, claims, providers. And there is very, very likely to be a bias in this data. So that is not a criticism, it is just a fact of life and health insurance operations. So you would have a bias in terms of in a voluntary system because not everybody will join. So you do not have data in there for those who have not joined the voluntary scheme. And for a mandatory scheme, you only have those who are covered by the mandatory scheme, which is always special population groups. So you have you might have very good data um, for the services utilized by these special groups, but not by the others. So you cannot just assume that this data is representative for the rest of the country. Or you might have a regional bias, because not all the health insurance does not cover the entire country yet, or a bias for certain services because you have inpatient but not outpatient. You get the drift. Plus, you have non-aggregated data. You have data for individual claims, for example, and not for all claims. And you only see what happened in the past. We're talking about historic data, which does not necessarily mean that what happened in the past will happen in the future again. So now to the actuarial analysis tools, which Andres will then talk about more. Here, the purpose is state data for statistical analysis. So you have to be really sure that there is no bias in there, or if there's a bias, you have to know about it. So you have to have transparency about the biases in your own data. Otherwise, there's a great risk that you will draw wrong conclusions. And I assume that we will need aggregated data. So we will not import individual claims, but summaries of certain groups of claims, for example. And the whole point of the actuarial analysis is to calculate probabilities. What will happen if? What will happen if you add new population groups, if you change the contribution rate, if you change the benefit package? So here we're looking into the future. Constanze, you can still hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, now this one here, I just want again to draw the connection to the last Bhela meeting. This was one of the slides from Puru about GIZ and Nepal, highlighting that this is the data which is actually available. So we have this, we have a huge wealth of data. Now the question is, what can we do with this, or how can we link it to a tool like ILO Health? And you know me by now, I like to draw pictures. So this is my attempt to show the connection between the two. So this is the one, this would be openIMIS, for example. And this one here could be ILO Health. Now, as I said before, let us start at this point. This is the current data, for example, in ILO, in Nepal, which is sort of stored in processed in openIMIS. And as I said before, this is real world data. So there is a step to get this real world data, or there's actually a couple of them, into the actuarial software. So a preparation of the data is needed. And I assume again that Andres will talk more about that. So this is not an automatic process. And what has to happen is, and I'm not even sure, maybe Andres maybe we come back to this slide in our discussion, because I would be curious to know if you say that the order is correct. We have to understand what the policymakers actually want to know. Are we talking about changes in benefit package, or in contributions rate, in financial sustainability? So what do they want to know? Then the data goes into the ILO tool, and then the actual analysis starts, the work which Andres and his colleagues will probably do. So this is sort of in the preparation of the data, you already need actuarial know-how. Constanze, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just checking once in a
Yes.
while. I hope that's fine for you. So you need actuarial know-how to enter the data into the system, and you need actuarial know-how to understand the results. So this is not self-explanatory, because we can assume that the policymakers have limited understanding of actuarial analysis and probabilities. So you need people like Andres to actually explain what we have found out with the actuarial analysis, and also explain and understand the limits of this analysis. And then this feeds into health policy decision making. It is not the same. It is not a one-to-one relation. So you have the results of the analysis, and then it's a simple translation into legislation, but it is one aspect which informs health policy making and legislation. And this would then feed again into the legislation and the benefit package, which then again might result in changes in health insurance operations and the health insurance IT system, because maybe you have more population groups, other items in your benefit package, other contributions rates. So all this then would sort of translate the legislation, health insurance legislation, translates into real world operations data again, resulting in new data, and the cycle starts again. So and the focus for the second part, before I hand over to Andres, will be the second side. So not the openIMIS side, which we discussed last time, but on the right side here, the role of a tool like ILO Health. Just to sum up, we're talking about two different tools, as I said before, openIMIS and the software, the tools used for actuarial analysis, like ILO Health. And this is not an automatic transfer of data, because otherwise you don't just transfer all your biases and all your real world data into a statistical tool. It's just not wise to do that. Even if it was possible, you don't want to do that. So the data must be prepared, processed, so that it can actually be used for the analysis. And also, I'm sure that Andres will talk more about this, about the complexity of the results. It's just not, you need to have mathematical and statistical know-how to understand how to read this. And so it is more than just having a tool inputting data, and sort of then translating those results into policies. That said, and maybe that will be a point of discussion, a good understanding, a good mutual understanding between these two sides, between the ones managing the health insurance operations and the ones managing the actuarial tools, a good mutual understanding of the data and of the processes will facilitate this process. The better you know each other, and the better you know each other's systems, the easier this will be. Probably it will take quite a bit of time if you do it the first time, but if you do it the second or the third, it will run much more smoothly. Yes, and with this, I would like to hand over